Well, next up on the pod, we're going to talk a little Tiger baseball with our baseball expert, Rogelio Castillo. And thanks for joining us again. It's been a while since we talked, but man, we've been all about the Tigers. This late run by Detroit was just incredible. I mean, I think it probably ended up, if you look at baseball throughout time, you don't see a lot of Cinderellas going deep in the playoffs or winning the World Series. It happens once in a while, but they sure made things exciting.
Yeah, they definitely did that, and it's one of those things where what we witnessed this year is something that I don't think it makes it very unique among. You look at like the '06 team and the teams in the 2013, 2012 seasons where they were the kind of the '06 team, yeah, off to a hot start, but we never seen a Cinderella story like the Tigers, and
Right.
same thing with the '84 Tigers. So it's very unique to see, especially with the amount of rookies on this roster.
Especially you talk about a Cinderella story, the '06 team, even the, 12, 13, 14, those runs. We loved them. This isn't a complaint, but those most of those guys were traded for, they were signed in free agency. These were a bunch of dudes that came up through the system, at least a number of guys that came up through the system. And that's your bread and butter, right? I mean, you're plugged into the minor league system there with the Tigers, and they have had some ups and downs. Dave Dombrowski basically traded everyone away from from the farm system to get those World Series runs that we had with him running the show. So how for you to see some of these guys that you've been watching in West Michigan and Toledo and Erie and stuff like that playing for the Tigers minor league teams, how is it for you to see them come up and make an impact at the big league level?
Well, first and foremost, it was just good to see some of the, like, for example, Mrs. Kolke's mom, Mary, was a very nice lady. I've been able to cultivate some relationship with some of the parents who were just appreciative of the coverage, and so hearing those little things like that, saying thank you, and um, when they get called up and everything, makes a world of difference to me. Because they know that we do this for a lot of this is a passion for us, and so and I'll be able to parlay this into a baseball writers association part of that, and so it's been that part, talking to Parker Meadows and seeing others who last year, for example, Brent Hurdler and Ty Madden were both
Right.
part of the Erie run last year. They won their first ever Eastern League title. To me, and to them, it's just like just being here right now has been, it's just a really, really cool experience. And to see even Parker Meadows going back to 2019 or 2021 when he was at West Michigan, and seeing those struggles where we were talking about like ground ball, using his legs to beat out ground balls, and then he's just,
Right.
you know, hitting majestic blasts over the center, or making, a grand slam to win a game in San Diego, as an example.
Right.
That stuff is really cool.
Yeah.
One of the guys who we just barely got to see a little bit of, Jackson Joe. From what I heard, he lights it up when he pitches, man. I mean, his stuff is nuts. What do you think we'll see of Jackson Joe next year? Do you expect him to be a starter? And what have you seen from him so far in his limited time, obviously with the Tigers, but also in Toledo and other stops like that?
I think he's going to be a starter next year, and he's a guy who can really mix it up on the top of the zone and then hit the bottom of the zone really well with his slider. But the fastball and changeup, the way he can change eye levels with that, but then to keep that slider, he's got three really good pitches. And I think the one thing that he learned in Toledo with the automated strike zone that I think helped him up here too was the ability to understand that there was pitches in Toledo that may get called a strike or a ball. Or a ball rather can be, thanks to the umps up here,
Right.
can be generous and get a strike. And I think Job he learned a lot too in Erie too, and as far as like just overcoming a tight strike zone. But his stuff is
Right.
really good, and I think they'll play up next year pretty well.
Not to question AJ Hinch or Chris Fetter, we are not in the position to do that. Did you like, though, just your opinion? Did you like the way they used Job when he came up? It was exciting. We're about to go to the playoffs, and you're bringing up the number one prospect in the major leagues, and he's going to be this cool spark plug heading into the playoffs. But he didn't have the best outings, when he was put out there. You could see the stuff like what you're talking about. But, he got roughed up a little bit. Did you like the way they used him, or would you have rather just wait till next season? Just your opinion.
I honestly like the way they used it because it
Okay.
reminds me of the way the Dodgers used their, like, for example, David Stewart, who was known for Oakland A's, Bob Welch. Some of those guys are part of the Dodgers teams in the late 70s, early 80s. That's how they brought up the rookie starters. And that's how they got their first foray into pitching. And they got postseason experience and they got the taste of that in a little bit. And I think Tigers pulled a little bit old school with that. So it was cool to see that, because if Hinch has done this all season long, he has taken his spot of when to choose these guys and when to put them in the positions to succeed. And I think Job was no different than anybody else. And I think I rather have him coming out of the bullpen with Hinch knowing in mind where to pick him versus starting in game 3 or game 4 in a pivotal game where he might have one bad pitch and Jose Ramirez takes him long.
Right.
And the fans have this really bitter experience in their mouth, or bitter taste in their mouth about it.
Right.
And it's not fair to him.
You know, this has been a fun team to watch because they're so young, the youngest team in baseball. And of course, you're following in the minor leagues some of the upcoming prospects. Who do you anticipate will be helping out the Tiger team here in the next year or so up at the big league level?
I think Jose Briseño, who's off to a really good start in the Arizona Fall League, has bounced back really well. Kevin McGonigal, who had an injury at the end of the season, I think his bat and his ability to play shortstop and second base. Max Clark too. I think those guys, especially McGonigal too, he's such a pure hitter, and watching him control the strike zone, he doesn't get fooled very often. And I think for his size and his ability to just put the bat on the ball skills, I think he's going to be a guy. Another prospect too, who's down in Arizona Fall League right now, who I like a lot, is Rogelio Castillo. Not because he has the last name as me, but he is 20 years old and did really well in Lakeland last year. Has a really good fastball, is up to 97, 98 with a slider with some good late life, and he's got a sinker that really can use the defense to make the plays for him. And I think that he's a guy who's going to contribute. And I think Roberto Campos who I think hopefully will start the year in Erie, is a guy who I think is starting to come in his own a little bit. Defensively, he was a liability last year, West Michigan, but improved greatly this year. And he's a guy I also like as well.
Do you think we'll see Max Clark?
Yeah, I think Max Clark. What I like about Max Clark, and he's continuously, I mean, outside of the cheerleading stuff that we saw on Twitter,
Right.
what I really liked about him a lot was the fact that he went back to work immediately after the season went over with. He has continuously worked on his swing to make it more even, more level. And there was a couple of bats this year, gentlemen, where in Lakeland, where he just would take the ball the other way and do the little things like that, getting the runner over.
Right.
We always think about, like, chicks dig the long ball and those kind of like cliches with that. But fundamentally speaking, Clark is such a good player. The ability to go, okay, you know what? There's a runner on second and third. I'm gonna hit the ball opposite field to bring the guys over. He's such a good teammate like that, and those little things like that, I thought really did a good job of coming to the surface this year.
You know the minor league system better than anybody, and you know what talent is coming up. Given that, what moves do you think the Tigers need, and what positions do they maybe need to address in the offseason this year? If you were Scott Harris, what positions would you be looking to fill?
I would look to fill third base, because I think the third base and first base, as much as I know Spencer Torkelson has, he has to improve. I mean, Scott Harris said it at the press conference himself. He has to improve in order to have a really good offseason. Or he has to have a really good offseason in order to make the roster. And so Jace Young, I think, is more suited for second base. That's just me. I knew Hyu Lee down in AA had a really good year, but his back issues aside, I know Scott Harris is a big fan of him as well. But is he ready for third base? I don't know. I really think that they really need to address getting another right-handed power bat, because there's one thing that was abundantly clear against Cleveland was when the Tigers, when it came down to it, outside of Kerry Carpenter, it was left-hand bat anyway, but still, they didn't have a guy. I mean, they didn't really have somebody that could hit that long ball with consistency, and that really cost them the series.
Yeah. I mean, it was the same thing with Torkelson that we've been having for the last, since he's been up in the big leagues. You're just hoping for that big league, that long ball. And he shows it sometimes. He had a couple big hits against Cleveland, but that's kind of the point that we're at with Torkelson. You're just hoping for those big hits, and every once in a while he has them. But yeah, it needs to become more consistent if you're going to be the everyday first baseman. So what do you think they're at a position, kind of piggybacking off Jared's question, to kind of build through the farm system? Or do you think they need to, we've heard all the things about they're in the bottom of the league in payroll, they have the money to spend. Do you think they're at a point, go spend money, go get Bregman, go get all these dudes, go get Jack Flaherty back, just go make all these signings? Or are you like, no, there's pieces, maybe sign a guy or two, but we've got pieces in the system to bring up?
I think there's pieces in the organization to bring up, and I think that they're going to be smart on who they sign. If there's one thing that it seems like Scott Harris is not going to do, is going to spend just the sake of spending. We're not going to see like a Jordan Zimmerman type of signing.
Right. Good.
As much as like,
we don't want that.
No. And I know that he talked about Kenta Maeda not being ready, and that there was their fault with that. And they only signed him to a 2-year deal, and it wasn't. I mean, I know Maeda had a really rough year.
Right.
But I think whoever they sign, whether it's Flaherty again, or they decide to take a flyer on Walker or Buehler coming back, whatever the case is, I think for the first time in my adult life, I can trust the Tigers to make somebody better as a pitcher.
Yes.
And that's something that we've never seen before from this organization. And Ted, I say this because you've seen a lot of baseball in your lifetime.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I refer to you with this is that if you look at the 84 Tigers, if you look at the 87 Tigers, and any team after that, this is the most developmentally sound Tigers team I've ever seen, like throughout my time, because just the ability to take somebody like Jason Foley, like these players, and make them better. Tigers have never been strong development pitching wise. You had Jack Morris, you had Dan Petrie, but those guys carried you for a certain period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, yeah, it was barren. I mean, you had Verlander. That's it. I mean, like, you had to get traded for Scherzer, but with pitching within, that's something that's unique and new.
Right.
And I think the Tigers have enough in their system to do that, to draw bullpen pieces, but they still need to go out and get another bat, because I think at the AA level and AAA level right now, they do lack another bat. They have some guys, McGonigal, Clark, don't get me wrong, but they still need another power bat that right now they don't have in their system.
Yeah, the name that's been kicked around mostly for third base is Bregman. I don't know if they can make a deal for him or get him as a free agent after this year. Yeah, so that may be one spot where they go. I got a question for you. It's from one of our listeners, Rick Johnson out of Flushing. Let me see if I can paraphrase this. He was excited about seeing 44,000 fans at some of those last games. The excitement level was huge. His question was, about 30 days or so before the end of the season, how many would you see? And I got to throw this on the table. I just was looking at some stats today. We've all three talked about what a great baseball town Detroit is, right? But if you look at the attendance when they don't have a very good product, it's not that good of a baseball town. Is that a fair statement? Because you look at the attendance, I mean, they're fifth from the bottom, on attendance at games. Yeah, we know they'll support them when they have a winning product, but you see some of these other ball clubs, they support them day in, day out, win or lose. What are your thoughts on that?
Ted, I mean, it's not wrong. I mean, there's times where I would go to a game where the Tigers were somewhat like 3 games under 500, 4 games under 500, and they were still drawing 15, 20,000. And so I know this town rallies around them when they're good, but sometimes like with some of the fans, I meet some of the fans that are hardcore, that they're all the time, every day. But then, like, if you take away the social media negativity, because that sometimes blocks you from seeing what things are. If you go down the ballpark, there's still that kind of like, people are like, I don't know about this.
Right.
Whereas the Lions, no matter what, it doesn't matter. The Lions could literally have an exhibition game in a parking lot somewhere, and it's going to be huge. It doesn't matter. The Lions can do no wrong. But the Tigers, I think people were skeptical because a lot to do with every comment always like, well, Chris Ilitch is not going to spend.
Right.
This team is just and I think they fooled everybody. I don't think I'm sorry, fooled.
Right.
That's a wrong word. I think they had to prove to everybody that this is a team that can win with the prospects they have, because sometimes we're too nice about the prospects, but if you really pay attention to what we say, we call it right down the middle.
Right.
And so I think Ted, to answer your question, I think I think it's not a base. People love baseball here when it's a winner.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it, because the stats don't lie,
Right.
But if you do put a winning product out there, watch out, because it is electric.
44,000 people at Comerica. I mean,
yeah. And it makes a big difference to the team. I mean, they rise up and play better in that kind of atmosphere as well. A little jealousy for me. I'm at the stage of my life where I like going down to weekday afternoon games, man. And you can buy the cheapest seat in the house, and sit wherever you want. So that's
Not
kind of
gonna
nice.
not gonna be able to do that if they have a winner on the
I
field.
know, I
Oh,
know.
yeah.
One last question from me. So you worked with this gentleman, I did as well. So John Kloss, I worked with him for a short period of time. You worked with him as well. One, how much do you think he was loving this Tigers run that they just had? And two, what's maybe a lasting legacy that you remember from working with John and kind of just carrying on? I mean, to me, just a beam of positivity. I never heard that guy say anything negative. He always had a smile on his face. That's definitely what I'll remember the most. What do you remember most about John?
John was this run for him, I think, would have been special for him, and I think he would have really gotten out of it because, John, I'm sorry, I'm just like he is by far he was one of the coolest, or excuse me, one of the most hardest working intern people I ever had, and he was a natural fit for the show because, two guys in their 40s, and then we have Uper who's in his 50s,
Right.
and there he is, a 22-year-old kid who just returned 2021.
Right.
And he just was a fresh face, and he just fit in with us. Like he was just it was like the most natural fit I've ever encountered. And his work ethic was second to none. And it was he really brought energy to something that, like, we all love doing this. Don't get me wrong. But
Right.
sometimes when we were too negative, he was like, come on, guys. And he would bring that angle back. And there's not a moment where I don't we have these moments where he would bring up these random videos of us. Like he used video game sound, stuff like that. He made us laugh a lot. And that's the thing about John that I will miss the most, is that he was an old soul. Forget the kid was 21. I really forget sometimes he was, because talking to him like that, he carried himself like the ever optimist. And of all the seasons for him to
We all love being around people like that. They lift us up, and that's all there is to it, for sure. Well, you're at a kind of point of the season where you get to take a deep breath, relax, maybe a little bit. I mean, we enjoy all your stuff that you do. Tell our listeners before we let you go how to follow you, where to get your input, all that good stuff.
So you can find us on tigersmlreports.com. You can follow us on Twitter at tigersmlreports, and on Facebook, Tigers Minor League Report, and you can follow me on Twitter at Rogcast Baseball, or Twitter X, or whatever they call it.
We love catching up with you, man. We love your stuff, and we really appreciate you taking the time out to join us here.
Thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate coming on tonight.